The black girl lay motionless on an airport bench until the billionaire who owned it arrived. The fluorescent lights of the airport terminal buzzed overhead like angry wasps trapped in glass boxes. Gate 27 was almost empty at 3 in the morning, except for the cleaning crew pushing their squeaky carts and a few passengers sleeping awkwardly in the hard plastic chairs. But there was something different tonight, something that made even the tired security guard stop and stare at his monitor. A small figure lay curled up on one of the benches near the window, completely still, like a forgotten doll someone had left behind. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, her dark skin glistening with sweat under the harsh lights, her small chest barely rising and falling with each labored breath. She wore a torn pink jacket that was too big for her tiny frame, mismatched shoes that had seen better days, and clutched a stuffed rabbit so worn that its original color was impossible to guess. Her hair was matted against her head, and even from a distance, anyone could see she was burning with fever. Christopher Hale walked through his airport like he owned it, because he did. Every gate, every runway, every overpriced coffee shop bore his signature somewhere in the paperwork. He was 42 years old, had built his empire from nothing, and hadn't taken a real day off in 15 years. Tonight was supposed to be routine, just checking on the new international terminal expansion, making sure everything was running smoothly for the morning rush. He wore a suit that cost more than most people made in a month, and his shoes clicked against the polished floor with the confidence of a man who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with money or influence. But when he turned the corner toward Gate 27, something made him stop. Maybe it was the way Officer Daniels was standing there, looking uncertain and worried, or maybe it was just instinct. But Christopher found himself walking toward the bench where the little girl lay motionless. As he got closer, he could see her lips moving slightly like she was trying to speak but couldn't find the strength. Her small fingers tightened around the rabbit, and a single tear rolled down her fevered cheek. Christopher had seen many things in his years building his business empire. He had negotiated with presidents of countries, had dinner with movie stars, and once even saved a rival company from bankruptcy just to prove he could. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of this child, alone and sick in his airport. He crouched down beside the bench, his expensive suit touching the dirty floor, and gently placed his hand on her forehead. Her skin was so hot it almost burned his palm. She stirred slightly at his touch, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment, revealing deep brown eyes filled with fear and confusion. She whispered something so soft he had to lean closer to hear it, and when he did, the words hit him like a physical blow. She said, "Papa, please don't leave me again." The child's eyes closed again, and she went limp in his arms as he caught her. Officer Daniels stepped forward, explaining that she had been there for nearly an hour, that no one had claimed her, that she seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. But Christopher wasn't listening anymore. Something about this child, something about her face, the shape of her nose, the curve of her chin, stirred a memory he had buried 7 years ago. The private medical wing of the airport was a place most people never knew existed. It was designed for VIP passengers who might need emergency care, equipped with the best equipment money could buy. Christopher carried the little girl there himself, refusing to let the paramedics take her from his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird made of hollow bones and fevered dreams. The nurses moved quickly, hooking her up to an IV, checking her vital signs, placing cool cloths on her burning forehead. The head nurse, Clara, was a woman in her 50s who had seen everything in her 30 years of nursing, but even she looked concerned as she read the thermometer. 104 degrees, severe dehydration, and signs of malnutrition that suggested this child hadn't had a proper meal in days, maybe weeks. Christopher stood in the corner of the room, his usually perfect composure cracking as he watched them work. He had built airports, had created jobs for thousands of people, had his picture on the cover of business magazines, but he felt completely helpless watching this small child fight for her life. The blood test results came back within an hour, and when Clara handed him the folder, her expression was strange, almost like she was afraid to speak. Christopher opened it and saw what had made her pause. The child's blood type was AB negative, one of the rarest blood types in the world. Less than 1% of the population had it. And Christopher knew this because he had the same type, had donated blood just 3 years ago after a minor surgery, and it was still in the hospital's database. He stared at the paper for a long time, his mind racing through possibilities he didn't want to consider. 7 years ago, he had been with someone, a woman named Marissa Lewis who had worked in the accounting department of one of his subsidiary companies. They had been together for 6 months, the longest relationship he had managed since starting his company. She had been different from the others, had seen past his money to the man underneath, had made him laugh in ways he had forgotten were possible. But she had left suddenly without explanation, just a note saying she needed to find herself, that their worlds were too different. He had looked for her, hired private investigators, but she had vanished completely, and eventually he had forced himself to move on, to bury himself in work and forget. Christopher pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Carter, who answered on the first ring despite it being 4 in the morning. He needed everything they could find on Marissa Lewis, needed to know where she had gone, what had happened to her, whether she had been pregnant when she left. As he spoke, he watched the little girl sleeping in the hospital bed, her breathing steadier now thanks to the IV fluids and medication. She had whispered something else before falling into a deeper sleep, something about her mama saying they would find someone kind, someone who would help them start over. Clara came back with more information, saying the child had told them her name was Anna, that she was 6 years old, that her mama had brought her to the airport but hadn't come back. She had waited and waited, sleeping on different benches, hiding from security, eating leftover food from the trash cans, until finally her little body couldn't take it anymore. The nurse's voice was soft as she explained that Anna had asked for her papa, had said her mama told her that her papa would find her someday, that he was important and busy but would love her when he knew about her. The morning sun was just starting to peek through the hospital windows when Carter arrived with a thick folder of information. His face was grim as he handed it over, and Christopher could see why as soon as he opened it. Marissa Lewis had died 2 weeks ago in a small town in Colorado, a car accident on a mountain road during a snowstorm. She had been working 3 jobs to support herself and her daughter, living in a tiny apartment above a laundromat, barely making ends meet. The last page of the file was a photocopy of Anna's birth certificate, and under the space for father's name, it was blank. But the date of birth lined up perfectly with when Marissa had left, 9 months almost to the day. Carter had also found something else, a storage unit in Marissa's name that had been paid up for 6 months in advance. Inside, they had found journals, photographs, and letters she had written but never sent. Letters to Christopher, explaining why she had left, why she couldn't tell him about the baby, how she had been afraid he would think she was after his money, how she wanted to raise Anna away from the spotlight and the pressure of his world. But in her final entries, as her money ran out and her health began to fail, she had written about bringing Anna to find her father, about how she had no choice left, how Anna deserved better than the life she could give her. Christopher sat in the hospital chair, reading through Marissa's journals as Anna slept. Each page was like a knife to his heart, seeing how she had struggled, how she had loved their daughter fiercely but had been too proud to ask for help. She wrote about Anna's first words, her first steps, how she laughed just like Christopher did with her whole body. She wrote about working double shifts to pay for Anna's preschool, about missing meals so Anna could eat, about crying at night when Anna asked why she didn't have a daddy like the other kids. But there were beautiful moments, too. Stories of Anna's curiosity, her kindness to stray cats, how she would share her lunch with kids who forgot theirs even when she barely had enough. Marissa had raised her to be generous and brave, to believe in goodness even when the world was hard. The final entry, dated just 3 days before her death, simply said that she was taking Anna to California, to the airport Christopher had built, because she had seen on the news that he would be there for the grand opening of the new terminal. She had planned to leave Anna with a note, to disappear before he could reject them, but the accident had happened before they could make it. The DNA test results came back that afternoon, confirming what Christopher already knew in his heart. Anna was his daughter, had been out there in the world for 6 years without him knowing, had been loved and protected by a woman he had never stopped caring about despite trying to forget. He stood by Anna's bedside as she slowly woke up, her fever finally breaking, her eyes focusing on his face with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She didn't know him, had never seen a picture of him, had only the stories her mother had told her about a father who was important and far away. Christopher sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, trying to make himself seem less intimidating, less like the billionaire CEO and more like just a man who had discovered he was a father. Anna clutched her rabbit tighter and asked in a small voice if he was the one who had helped her, if he was the kind person her mama had said would be at the airport. He nodded, his throat tight with emotion, and told her yes, he was there to help, that she was safe now, that no one would hurt her or leave her alone again. The next few days passed in a blur of legal documents, emergency custody hearings, and media speculation that Christopher ruthlessly shut down. He moved Anna from the hospital to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, had his housekeeper, Mrs. Helen, set up a bedroom fit for a princess, bought more toys and clothes than any child could need. But Anna didn't care about any of that. She clung to her old rabbit, wore her mother's jacket despite having a closet full of new ones, and spent hours looking out the window as if waiting for someone. Christopher worked from home, canceling meetings and delegating responsibilities so he could be there when she woke up from nightmares calling for her mama. He learned that she liked her sandwiches cut in triangles, that she was afraid of thunder but tried to be brave, that she hummed the same lullaby her mother used to sing when she was trying not to cry. Slowly, carefully, he began to tell her about himself, about how he had known her mother, how special she had been. He showed her pictures from the few months he and Marissa had been together, watched as Anna traced her mother's face with her small finger and smiled through her tears. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, on a rainy Sunday morning. Christopher was making breakfast, burning the pancakes because he had never really learned to cook, when Anna appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. She was holding something in her hands, a small locket he hadn't noticed before. She opened it to show him a tiny picture inside, one half showing Marissa, the other half empty. She said her mama had told her that someday she would meet someone who belonged in the other half, someone who would love her even though he didn't know her yet. She looked up at Christopher with those big brown eyes that were so much like his own and asked if he wanted to be in the empty half. He knelt down to her level, his vision blurring with tears he hadn't cried in years, and told her he would be honored. She threw her arms around his neck then, her small body shaking with sobs as she finally let herself grieve for the mother she had lost and accept the father she had found. Christopher held her tight, promising her that he would never leave, that he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years he had missed. The memorial service for Marissa was small and private, held in a garden overlooking the ocean. Christopher had searched for any family she might have had, but found none, just as she had written in her journals. It was just him, Anna, Mrs. Helen, and surprisingly, Officer Daniels, who had asked to come pay his respects to the woman who had raised such a brave little girl. Anna placed flowers on the memorial stone, white roses because her mama had always said they meant new beginnings. She told her mama about her new room, about how Christopher had learned to make her favorite soup, about how he read to her every night even though he wasn't very good at doing the voices. She promised her mama that she would be good, that she would remember everything she had been taught about being kind and brave. Christopher stood beside her, his hand on her small shoulder, and made his own promise to Marissa. He would raise their daughter with love and patience, would make sure she knew how special her mother had been, would give her every opportunity while still teaching her the values Marissa had instilled. 6 months later, the airport had changed. Christopher had installed a children's play area at Gate 27, with soft carpets and colorful murals and a small library of books for young travelers. He had also created the Marissa Lewis Foundation, providing support for single mothers and their children, offering everything from emergency housing to educational scholarships. Anna helped him choose the recipients, reading through applications with a seriousness beyond her years, always choosing the families who reminded her of how she and her mama had lived. She was in school now, making friends, learning to be a regular kid despite the unusual circumstances of her life. She still carried the old rabbit everywhere, still wore her mother's jacket on cold days, but she also laughed more, smiled more, had begun to call Christopher Daddy without hesitation. He had cut back his work hours dramatically, something that had shocked his board of directors, but he didn't care. Every afternoon at 3, he picked Anna up from school himself, helped her with homework, listened to her stories about her day. The first anniversary of finding Anna at the airport arrived with unexpected emotions for Christopher. He stood at Gate 27, now transformed into a bright, welcoming space, and remembered that terrifying night when he had found his daughter burning with fever on a hard bench. Anna was with him, healthy and happy, wearing a new dress but still clutching her faithful rabbit. She had insisted on coming back, on seeing where her story with her daddy had begun. They sat together on a new, comfortable bench that had replaced the old plastic ones, and Anna told him something her mama used to say, that sometimes people had to get lost before they could be found, that sometimes the hardest journeys led to the best destinations. Christopher pulled her close, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. He thought about Marissa, about the strength it must have taken to raise Anna alone, about the courage it took to bring her to find him even as she was dying. The letters started coming a few months later, from other single mothers who had heard Anna's story despite Christopher's attempts to keep it private. They wrote about their own struggles, their own fears, their own children who asked about absent fathers. Anna insisted on reading each one, helping Christopher understand that their story wasn't unique, that there were so many children like her who needed someone to believe in them. Together, they expanded the foundation, created programs specifically for children who had lost parents, who had been abandoned or forgotten. Anna became the youngest board member in history, attending meetings with her rabbit and asking questions that cut straight to the heart of every issue. She had inherited her mother's compassion and her father's business sense, a combination that made her formidable despite her young age. Christopher watched her grow with a mixture of pride and sadness, proud of who she was becoming but sad for all the years he had missed. The day Anna turned 8, Christopher gave her a special gift. He had hired an artist to create a portrait of Marissa based on all the photographs he could find, captured her just as he remembered her, with that gentle smile and kind eyes. Anna hung it in her room, right where she could see it every morning when she woke up and every night before she went to sleep. But the real gift came that evening when Christopher showed her a video he had found in Marissa's storage unit, one he had been waiting for the right time to share. It was Marissa, filmed just days before the accident, sitting in their tiny apartment and talking to the camera as if talking to Anna in the future. She spoke about love, about courage, about how Anna should never be afraid to reach for her dreams. She spoke about Christopher, too, about how she had loved him, about how she knew he would be a wonderful father when he finally met his daughter. She ended by singing the lullaby she had always sung, the one Anna still hummed when she was scared or sad. Christopher had learned to cook properly by Anna's 9th birthday, could make her favorite pasta without burning it, could even bake a cake that was actually edible. They had developed their own traditions: Saturday morning pancakes with too much syrup, Sunday afternoons at the museum or the park, bedtime stories that had evolved into chapter books they read together. Anna had grown taller, her face losing some of its baby roundness, but she still carried the rabbit, now held together with careful stitches and patches. She had started asking more questions about her mother, about why she had left, about what would have happened if the accident hadn't occurred. Christopher answered as honestly as he could, explaining adult relationships in terms a child could understand, never blaming Marissa for her choices, always emphasizing how much she had loved Anna. He had also begun telling her about his own childhood, about growing up with parents who had worked multiple jobs, about building his business from nothing, about how success meant nothing if you didn't have someone to share it with. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Christopher was in a board meeting and Anna was at school. It was from a hospital in Denver, from a doctor who had treated Marissa in her final year. He had been going through old files and had found something that Christopher needed to know. Marissa had been sick, not just at the end but for months before the accident. Cancer that she had hidden. Treatment she had refused because she couldn't afford it and couldn't bear to leave Anna alone while she was in the hospital. The doctor had begged her to reach out to Christopher, had even offered to make the call himself, but she had refused, had said she would handle it her own way when the time was right. The accident had taken that chance away from her, but the doctor felt Christopher should know that Marissa had been planning to contact him, had written a letter that was still in her medical file. Christopher read that letter sitting in his car outside Anna's school, tears streaming down his face as Marissa explained everything, apologized for keeping Anna from him, begged him to love their daughter the way she deserved to be loved. That evening, Christopher sat Anna down and told her about her mother's illness, about how brave she had been, about how every choice she had made had been out of love for Anna. Anna cried, but they were different tears than before, tears of understanding rather than just loss. She asked if her mama had been in pain, and Christopher told her the truth, that yes, she probably had been, but that she had hidden it to be strong for Anna. They looked through more of Marissa's journals together, finding entries where she had written about feeling sick but pushing through because Anna needed her, about praying for just enough time to get Anna somewhere safe. Anna said something then that broke Christopher's heart and healed it at the same time. She said her mama had been a superhero, that superheroes always sacrifice themselves to save others, and that her mama had saved her by bringing her to find her daddy. They created a new tradition that night, lighting a candle for Marissa every evening at dinner, taking a moment to tell her about their day, to include her in their lives even though she was gone. As Anna grew into her preteen years, she began to show interest in the family business, asking Christopher about airports and airlines, about how businesses worked, about how he made decisions that affected so many people. He brought her to the office during school holidays, let her sit in on meetings where appropriate, taught her about spreadsheets and profit margins, but also about corporate responsibility and treating employees with respect. She had ideas of her own, suggesting programs for unaccompanied minors at the airport, creating safe spaces for children who were traveling alone or with single parents. Her personal experience gave her insights that none of Christopher's executives could match, and he found himself actually implementing many of her suggestions. The board members who had once questioned his decision to raise Anna alone now sought her opinion on family-oriented initiatives, recognizing that this young girl had a perspective that could transform their business model. The anniversary of Marissa's death was always difficult, but by the 5th year it had become less about mourning and more about celebration of her life. Christopher and Anna would take the day off, no matter what was happening at work or school, and spend it doing things Marissa had loved. They would go to a bookstore because Marissa had loved to read, have lunch at a small family restaurant because she had always preferred those to fancy places, and end the day at the beach because she had written about dreaming of living by the ocean. Anna would tell stories about her mother that she remembered, small things like how she would dance while cooking, or how she would make up silly songs about everyday tasks. Christopher would share his own memories about Marissa's laugh, about her determination, about how she had challenged him to be better than he was. They would end the day by releasing balloons into the sky, each one carrying a message to Marissa, telling her about their year, about how they were taking care of each other. Anna was 13 when she found the rest of the letters, the ones Christopher hadn't known existed, hidden in a secret pocket of Marissa's old jacket that Anna still kept in her closet. These letters were different, written to Anna for different stages of her life, to be opened on specific birthdays or milestones. There was one for her 13th birthday, one for her high school graduation, her college graduation, her wedding day, the day she became a mother herself, if that day ever came. Christopher and Anna sat together as she opened the 13th birthday letter, both of them crying as Marissa's voice seemed to speak from the page. She wrote about becoming a teenager, about how Anna's body and emotions would change, about how she should never be afraid to talk to her father about anything, even the embarrassing stuff. She wrote about boys and friends and peer pressure, about staying true to herself, about remembering that she was loved beyond measure. She ended the letter by saying that she knew Christopher would be reading this too, and she wanted him to know that she had never regretted their time together, had never regretted Anna, had only regretted not being brave enough to trust in their love. The years passed with a rhythm of their own, marked by school plays and business trips, soccer games and board meetings, homework struggles and breakthrough moments. Anna grew into a remarkable young woman, carrying her mother's kindness and her father's determination, but also something uniquely her own, a wisdom born from loss and love in equal measure. She had boyfriends that Christopher pretended to approve of while secretly running background checks, had heartbreaks that he didn't know how to fix with money or influence, had dreams that sometimes aligned with his plans for her and sometimes didn't. She decided she wanted to be a doctor, to help children the way the doctors had helped her that night at the airport, and Christopher supported her completely, even though he had secretly hoped she would take over the family business. She volunteered at children's hospitals, shadowed pediatricians, threw herself into her studies with an intensity that reminded him of himself at that age. When Anna graduated high school as valedictorian, Christopher sat in the audience with tears streaming down his face, holding the rabbit that Anna had asked him to bring for luck. In her speech, she talked about second chances, about how sometimes families are broken and remade, about how love isn't always conventional, but it's always powerful when it's real. She thanked her mother for giving her life and values, thanked her father for giving her a future and opportunities, but most of all, she thanked them both for teaching her that family isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. After the ceremony, she opened Marissa's graduation letter, which told her how proud she was, how she had always known Anna would achieve great things, how she should never forget where she came from even as she soared to new heights. Marissa had also included a small note for Christopher, thanking him for being the father she had always known he could be. College took Anna across the country to study pre-med at Johns Hopkins, and Christopher felt her absence like a physical ache. The apartment that had been filled with her laughter and energy felt empty, too quiet, too neat. He threw himself back into work but found it didn't satisfy him the way it once had. He had built his empire for himself, but he had rebuilt his life for Anna, and without her daily presence, he felt adrift. They talked every day, video calls where she showed him her dorm room, introduced him to her roommates, complained about organic chemistry and anatomy class. He flew out once a month to take her to dinner, bringing care packages that Mrs. Helen insisted on preparing, filled with Anna's favorite snacks and notes of encouragement. During her winter break, she came home and they fell back into their old rhythms as if she had never left, cooking together, watching movies, visiting Marissa's memorial. The call that changed everything came during Anna's junior year of college. It was from a woman in Montana who had seen an old news article about the Marissa Lewis Foundation and recognized the picture. She was Marissa's aunt, someone who had lost touch with the family years ago after a falling out but had always wondered what had happened to her niece. She had photographs, letters, family history that Anna had never known existed. Christopher flew her out to meet Anna during spring break, and they spent hours going through old albums, learning about Marissa's childhood, her parents who had died when she was young, the extended family she had lost touch with while trying to survive. Anna discovered she had cousins, second cousins, a whole web of family she had never known about. It was bittersweet, learning about the life her mother had before, understanding why she had been so determined to create a family of her own, even if it was just the two of them. Anna's college graduation was a triumph and a new beginning rolled into one. She had been accepted to medical school at Stanford, had won scholarships and awards, had research published in medical journals. Christopher watched her walk across the stage, thinking about that 6-year-old girl burning with fever on an airport bench, and marveled at the journey they had taken together. That evening, she opened Marissa's college graduation letter, the longest one yet. In it, Marissa wrote about her own dreams that had been deferred, about how she had wanted to go to college but life had intervened, about how watching Anna achieve everything she couldn't was the greatest joy she could imagine. She wrote about the importance of using education not just for personal gain but to help others, about remembering that every patient would be someone's child, someone's parent, someone's entire world. She told Anna that she had always known she was destined for greatness, had seen it in her eyes from the day she was born. Medical school was grueling, and there were times when Anna called Christopher in tears, exhausted and overwhelmed, wondering if she was strong enough to continue. He would remind her of her strength, of how she had survived losing her mother, being alone at the airport, building a new life with a father she didn't know. He would fly up for the weekend, take her away from her books, force her to rest and eat real food instead of the coffee and energy bars she was living on. During her residency, when she was working 36-hour shifts and barely had time to sleep, he would show up at the hospital with meals for her and her fellow residents, earning him the title of favorite dad among her cohort. She specialized in pediatric emergency medicine, drawn to helping children in their most vulnerable moments, just as she had been helped. The day Anna got married was surreal for Christopher, watching his daughter in white, radiant with happiness, marrying a fellow doctor she had met during residency. He walked her down the aisle, the rabbit tucked into her bouquet at her insistence, a piece of her childhood carried into her future. During the father-daughter dance, she told him that she had saved Marissa's wedding letter to open with her new husband, but she wanted Christopher to know that everything good in her life had come from having two parents who loved her, even if one could only love her from memory and the other had to learn how to love her in person. Christopher's speech at the reception was simple but powerful, talking about how Anna had taught him that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances but about showing up, staying present, and choosing family every single day. When Anna had her first child, a daughter she named Marissa Grace, Christopher thought his heart might actually burst from the overwhelming emotion. Watching his daughter become a mother, seeing her gentle patience and fierce protectiveness, was like watching Marissa's legacy continue in the most beautiful way possible. Anna was a natural mother, balancing her career with parenthood, supported by her husband and Christopher, who had become the most devoted grandfather imaginable. He would arrive at their house with too many toys, stay to help with night feedings, tell little Marissa stories about her grandmother, the brave woman who had loved so deeply that it transcended death itself. When Anna finally opened Marissa's letter about becoming a mother, she had to read it aloud through tears, sharing her mother's words about the sacred responsibility of raising a child, about how motherhood would challenge and change her in ways she couldn't imagine, about how she would finally understand the depth of a parent's love. Christopher retired when little Marissa was 5, the same age Anna had been when he found her. He had built his empire, had achieved more than he had ever dreamed, but nothing compared to the wealth of family he had discovered through loss and love. He spent his days picking up his granddaughter from kindergarten, teaching her to read, taking her to the airport to watch planes take off and land, telling her the story of how he had found her mother on a bench and how it had changed his entire life. Anna had become the head of pediatric emergency medicine at her hospital, had established programs for children in crisis, had won awards and recognition, but she always said her greatest achievement was breaking the cycle of loss, giving her daughter the complete family she had never had. The circle of their story completed itself on another anniversary of that night at the airport. 3 generations stood at Gate 27, which had been transformed into a children's area with a plaque dedicating it to Marissa Lewis and all the single mothers who sacrifice everything for their children. Little Marissa placed flowers beneath the plaque while Anna held Christopher's hand, both of them remembering their own journey. The airport bustled around them, travelers rushing to gates, families reuniting, children laughing, life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Anna spoke at the dedication ceremony, talking about how places become sacred not because of what they are, but because of what happens there, how an airport bench had become the birthplace of her family's second chance. She talked about her mother's courage, her father's transformation, and her own journey from abandoned child to accomplished woman. As Christopher stood there, now in his 70s, watching his daughter speak with eloquence and passion, watching his granddaughter play with the same worn rabbit that had comforted Anna through her darkest nights, he understood that success wasn't measured in the airports you built or the money you earned, but in the lives you touched and the love you shared. He thought about Marissa often, wondering what she would think of how their story had unfolded, hoping she would be proud of how he had raised their daughter. In quiet moments, he could almost feel her presence, especially when Anna laughed, in that way that was purely her mother's or when little. Marissa tilted her head with the same curiosity Marissa had shown when puzzling through a problem. The foundation they had, created in Marissa's name, had helped thousands of single mothers and children over the years, providing not just financial support but community, resources, and hope. Anna served as its president now, using her medical knowledge to expand its health services, ensuring that no mother would have to choose between her own health and her child's welfare the way Marissa had. Every year, they held a gala that raised millions, but more importantly, it brought together families who had been helped, creating a network of support that extended far beyond monetary assistance. Christopher would speak at these events, telling his story without shame, acknowledging his failures and celebrating the redemption he had found through fatherhood. When Christopher passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Anna was holding his hand. His last words were about Marissa, about how he would finally get to thank her for the gift of their daughter, for teaching him that love was worth more than any empire. His funeral was attended by thousands, from business moguls to single mothers whose lives he had touched through the foundation, but the most moving tribute came from Anna. She spoke about how her father had shown that it's never too late to become the person you're meant to be, how he had transformed from a distant billionaire to a devoted father, how he had honored her mother's memory by becoming the man Marissa had always believed he could be. She read from both her mother's journals and her father's letters, weaving together a story of love, loss, redemption, and the powerful bonds that connect us across time and space. Little Marissa, now a teenager, stood beside her mother at the podium and read a letter her grandfather had written for her to open after his death. In it, he told her about the night he found her mother, about how a sick little girl on an airport bench had saved his life by giving it meaning, about how love sometimes comes in unexpected packages and at inconvenient times, but is always worth embracing. He told her to be brave like her grandmother Marissa, to be determined like her mother, but most importantly, to be herself, to write her own story, to never be afraid of love even when it seems impossible. He ended by saying that she carried within her the strength of 3 generations, the legacy of a woman who loved fearlessly, a man who learned to love fully, and a mother who bridged both worlds with grace. The airport still stands, expanded and modernized over the years, but Gate 27 remains a special place. The children's area is always full of life, with reading corners and play spaces, staffed by volunteers who understand that airports aren't just places of transit, but can be places of transformation. Anna visits regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with her children, always carrying the old rabbit that has become a family talisman. She tells the story to anyone who asks, about how a father and daughter found each other in the most unlikely place, about how loss can lead to unexpected gifts, about how love transcends death and time and distance. The bench where she was found has been preserved, with a small plaque that simply reads, "Sometimes we must lose everything to find what matters most," in memory of Marissa Lewis, who loved enough to let go, and in honor of all.